Madhvi, as a clinical psychologist, the diagnosis of any childhood disability disorder in India, especially and outside India, also comes from a clinical psychologist or a psychiatrist through assessments. Right?
Mm,
There's a protocol that we follow governed with RCI, that is Rehabilitation Council of India.
mm,
But India being such a vast country, right, it's very difficult to figure out or to completely pinpoint where should one go for diagnosis and with whom the diagnosis should be proper, whom to accept the diagnosis. Have
okay.
you faced such a problem in your organization in the 14, 15 years?
Yes, it is a bit of a challenge for us too. In the beginning, I didn't know much when I started 14 years ago, because the information was not so widely available as it is now. But from what I've understood, and according to the RCI rules, the diagnosis of autism has to be given ideally by a clinical psychologist. If she is in a clinic, then she definitely has to sign the report and do the assessment, or somebody who's doing the assessment has to do it under her supervision and guidance. And there's another qualification that people can do again if there's a clinical psychologist ideally with them, is somebody who did their B.Ed in autism,
Hmm.
B.Ed autism, which is an RCI recognized qualification. Well, they can only do autism diagnosis. They cannot do developmental assessments or any other assessments, psychometric, psychological assessments, but just autism. So I don't like really just to do a child's autism assessment directly as child comes and to our clinic and we see the child and the parents are telling that we are suspecting autism. You might also be suspecting autism, and then you just don't jump to autism assessment, because many childhood conditions mimic autism, and we need to ensure that just because there are 2 3 symptoms of autism, we just don't label a child or give a diagnosis just like that. So first, I mean, since you are the clinical psychologist and you take care of all the clinical psychology related activities here, um, we all agreed that we will first do a child's developmental assessment
Hmm.
to see that the child's overall development is delayed or not, and look at all those areas where the development is delayed. Like for instance, typically a child with autism will have good motor development, but social development is hampered, socio-emotional development is hampered, speech and language development is delayed. There could also be little bit of fine motor issues, and there will
Hmm.
be sensory issues if you see a
Hmm.
developmental assessment. And then we also do another OT assessment, like a general OT evaluation, where you see the child has some motor related fine motor issues or vestibular issues, hyperactivity, and sensory. We do a sensory profile to see if the child has any sensory difficulties, hyper or hyposensitive, because one of the main areas where children with autism will have challenges will be sensory development, so we do the sensory development. And then we do also a proper physio evaluation for motor development. We do a VSMS to see
Social.
social issues, if there are any social developmental issues. And then we do a speech evaluation, a speech and language evaluation, that is PLS 5 or self or something like that, a proper like 2 hour evaluation. Then we do cars 2 along with all these things. Then the whole series of assessments that we do, they tell the same story, because the child is delayed in speech everywhere, and socio emotional everywhere. So it's like we are not just labeling a child simply by doing cars. I somehow feel that we need to do a developmental assessment, a speech assessment, a physical assessment, an occupational assessment, and a sensory assessment with socio emotional assessment like VSMS, and then do cars too, not just cars, and give a report that the child has autism. What if the other assessments are pointing to somewhere else.
Hmm.
So we can't miss out on that. That's why we take about 3 to 4 days of assessments, and then another couple of days for preparing the report, because a physiotherapist will give a report, OT will give a report, speech and language therapist will give a report, psychologist will give a report, and all the reports are compiled. And then the overall report is looked to see the consistency of all the sections in the report, to see that confidently if we can say that the child has ASD or not. Not just doing it in 15 minutes, CARS assessment in a small room in a hospital setting, and saying that the child has ASD, you know. So I don't agree with that at all. I personally feel that, yes, I'm not against labeling a child if the child needs to be labeled, because then the child will be helped. But labeling the child without understanding properly the development of the child, and being sure that the child has ASD, is not accepted for me. So that's why we ensured that we have all the assessments in house. And parents, especially in some setups or in some clinics, only speech language therapist is present, so they can only do speech assessment. In some clinics only OTs are present, so only OT assessment is done. And in some hospitals only a clinical psychologist is present, so only clinical psychology related assessments like DP3 or DST is done, and maybe CARS is done, but others are not done. So maybe everybody has their own challenges, but I feel that a holistic assessment, a multi, what do you say, a
Dimensional.
multi-dimensional assessment where all these specialists are under one roof, and parents have to don't have to run from pillar to post to get these 6 assessments to 6 different places. Because every time you have to build a rapport with the child, it's very hard, and it's very difficult for the child to get used to new places. So what we do is, first one day we build the rapport with the child, and then once everybody does their own part of assessments, they all can talk to each other how their experience was with the child, because they're all in the same place. So that really makes the assessment complete, and reliable. The diagnosis is reliable more than anything. So that's why I feel that that kind of process is required.
No, you're completely right. And I must add here that it takes 3, 4 days also in the assessment, because sometimes the child does not respond on the first day.
Right.
Right. The child will cooperate maybe the second day or the third day and the fourth day. So we can't assess or diagnose a child because the child has not cooperated. That
No,
would be completely wrong. So the
absolutely.
assessment has to be divided into 3 to 4 days. Right?
Yes.
It just you don't want us to label the child because the child has not cooperated, because maybe he's hungry or it's a new place or has not adapted well or is not cooperating.
Yeah.
That's why so much time.
And also, we want to interact with the child too. We
Mm,
want to talk to the
mm,
child. We want to interact with the child. We want to see how the child is. What sometimes of these assessments will have a parent questionnaire and a,
mm,
professional questionnaire. So sometimes a
mm,
parent questionnaire and the professional questionnaire don't match what the
mm,
mother is mostly saying, and what the therapist has observed, they are not matching. So when we interact with the child, we are more than sure ki, okay, what I've deducted from this conversation, because I have actually worked with the child, I know that this
mm,
child is able to do
mm,
this or not able to do this. And also, that's another important thing. Usually, mothers will say, my child does this at home, but doesn't do it here. So, for us, that's also another important clue that the child is not able to generalize the skill from home
mm.
to another place, you know.
Yes.
So, those are important. Those are important indicators for professionals. So these are important for, that's why we tell parents that we would like to do assessment here, not on Zoom, not in your home, because we are not able to tell if the child's able to generalize that or not, you know. So that's why we would like to take even 5 days. No, we are not in a hurry. We will take as much time as it is required to make sure that the child's report comes out correct, or as close to correct as possible, because children are children at the end of the day. Sometimes the behavior is not the same everywhere, but we would like to try our best, you know, to make sure that we build rapport and we spend time with the child.
Completely. I was remembering, I just remembered the conversation that we had in one of your journeys, right, when we were talking about a diagnosis given to you for Varun, and
Yes,
that we had half an hour, 1 hour in a room that just the
that,
psychologist just gave you the diagnosis.
that's
It
it.
was just so sad. I
There
mean,
was
how can
no
you be
place.
sure
There
about?
was no place to move, Isha. Literally the room was probably 4 by 6 or 5 by 6 or something. Literally, there was enough only place for one small table, one chair, and 2 chairs for adults to sit. There's nothing for the child. Whereas we here have like a whole kit of toys. Like we take the whole box and we sit on the floor with the child. We put the mat on the floor. We sit with the child. We allow the child to get accustomed to the room. To we are talking to the parents and getting information while the child is moving around playing. There's no restriction for the child to move. So uh, the child needs to feel comfortable before we interact. We just can't say, okay, now sit down. He's a 2-year-old, for God's sake. We can't expect a 2-year-old to just sit and do the assessment because the parents have paid us the fee. It doesn't work like that. On some days we have the child's, and also if they have ASD, they don't like to go to new places and they don't like change. That means it's even harder for them to get used to us. So we have to give them, I tell the parent, just come here for 2-3 days every day, spend 5-10 minutes and then go back. Then the child, for then fourth day we start the assessment, because by fourth day the place is more familiar to the child. Then we give a sticker to the child, or we give some toy to play with the child, or the child can bring his own toys here to play and then take it back, or bring his own things into the room so that the child feels more comfortable, and that toy is one familiar thing for the child in the room. So it's very important for us to understand that children need to, be given that kind of time. Assessments cannot be done overnight. In like some people
And
request
assessment.
us, we are going to America tomorrow, we do it today. I said, no, we don't want to do it tomorrow. We'll need time,
No,
yeah.
and assessments is not just questionnaires filled by parents and yes or no. It has to be a play based. I mean, you're talking to children. It has to be play based.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Completely.
And children don't really care about all this. It's for us, it's for adults, it's for professionals. So why does a child bother about it? They don't bother about any of those things. So yeah. Yeah.